business, soul-led purpose, and sacred sexuality, the Queen's Council is a container devoted to the intimate magic of queenship, soul, sex, magic, and the goddess. Together we weave a coven to hold our wildest dripping pleasure as magic oozes from our souls, cascading into the world like the ambrosia nectar of the divine. If you're ready to become a confident, embodied woman running your feminine-led empire from a place of spaciousness, wild creativity, alignment, and pleasure, the Queen's Council is opening up applications. Experience a radical and loving relationship with money and prosperity, wildly thriving and living your visions for your most beautiful life. Because being a queen in your life means setting higher standards for your pleasure, your purpose, and prosperity. As a mystic, visionary artist, or healer here on the planet to shift the collective trajectory, you're ready for a massive shift internally in how you be in the world. So step into your queenship surrounded by other women who are setting a higher standard for how they create and manifest in the world. Applications open now, and we start in November.
Hi everyone, I'm Phoenix Amara of Temple Talks Transmissions from the New Earth. And I am just like throbbing with excitement for this amazing interview that we're about to have with Orly. And she is like, she's got some stuff to share around feminine sexuality, around sex priestess codes, around the wild woman, the lover archetype. And I'm just so elated you're here, Orly. So I'm going to introduce her. And she's a sensual alchemist, a somatic sexual healer, and a channel for orgasmic awakening. She uses her healing gifts to help people to awaken to the bliss of their being through movement, meditation, breath, intuitive touch, and transformational energy work. She has been a transformational facilitator and energy healer for the past 10 years, as well as a teacher in sensual dance and movement. She has been a priestess in many lifetimes, and this time around, she feels that the planet is finally ready to receive the gifts of pleasure as a portal into oneness. Welcome, Orly. Wow. So we know each other through a very interesting circumstance. We are being mentored under the same dakini. And, you know, for those of you who are listening out there, this woman is incredible, but can you share with them a little bit more about who you are and the work that you do in the world as a sex priestess?
Yes, absolutely. Well, I'm so just excited to be here. All the cells in my body are already turned on. So
oh yeah, mama.
It's like, what's the saying where 2 or more dakinis are gathered?
Oh yeah. Oh,
Lots of come happens.
Ambrosia.
Cells come together. Yeah. So I am so grateful to be here and to just be a part of all of these amazing women that are leading this, transformation on this planet into the truth of what we all already are and already know. So that is really the work I do, is assisting people in embodying what they are at the core of their very being, which is bliss, which is pleasure. We are made from orgasmic energy. We come into this world in orgasm. We are literally orgasmic bliss in every cell of our body. And it's my honor to remind every being that I teach or work with one-on-one that this is what they are, so they can tap into it for themselves. So I do that through somatic healing, and then for my own personal pleasure journey and healing, dance and sensual movement and kind of reclaiming my sensual sovereignty was my path, and I love sharing that with women.
Mm. So, Orly, how did you know that this like was your path? Like, what was that moment? Whether you were 7 or 17, like, what was that moment that you were like, I'm going to be a sex priestess on the planet. Like, I am a sex priestess. I am here to heal the relationship to sexuality and sensuality. Like, what was that moment for you? Or was it just gradual, or did you just always know?
It's a combination. It was one, I was always very, I would say I always gravitated towards sensual movement and being naked. When I was little, like there's a lot of photos of me just like eating outside in nature, naked. So I was always very free in my body that way.
Mm.
But I do remember getting in trouble. My parents told me I got sent home from friends' houses for being like too much sexual energy at 7, but not because I was doing anything overtly sexual. My being was just too much. It brought up stuff for people.
Mm.
So I kind of held it back a little bit, even though I expressed it in other ways. And then when I finally just said, okay, fine, I'm willing to actually step into this role and like create a career out of it and a business out of it, that was like a progression. But there was a moment like 3 years ago where I really said yes to the even deeper work. And I surrendered my whole life up to the universe. And I just said, I don't even care what it looks like anymore, because I've been sort of trying to control how it looked. Like, I taught transformational movement and I taught it naked, but it was still like holding back a little. I taught erotic embodiment, but there was still, it wasn't fully expressed. And when I did that deep surrender, it was like all of a sudden everything lined up. And I started working with clients one-on-one and haven't looked back. And like everything changed. My finances changed, like my everything. Like it was just magic, right? And I know the power of being in tune and in touch and in complete, really empowerment with your sensual, sexual energy. And I'd always thought I was empowered until I started doing this work. And that was like a whole other level. When you start getting paid for being a priestess, like everything is fucking magic all the time.
Yeah. Okay. So let's talk about that. So bring us into your life a little bit more about like what kind of experiences, that you have had that have really, I think, like blown your mind in terms of like even your own awakening or like unleashing, and there is a piece of that with, someone who's on a journey. There is a difference when you're just on your healing journey for yourself. But then when you actually step into this role as like as someone who's doing this as your livelihood, it does catapult you into a different level of like your expression.
Yeah. Well, there's no room to be out of alignment, which is like the biggest blessing, right? Like I used to be able to go in and out and like use the spiritual tools and then go back into the ego and forget, right? Because it's like there's this duality of like, it is all this bliss and love and light. And then we are in a human body in a physical form. And it requires a certain like level of discipline in a loving, most amazing way to consciously choose, right? What we put our attention on. So when I was doing my own sort of work during that time, because that was where it had to start, right? I had to get into alignment in love within myself before I was able to really share up and show up for other people. And that's still part of the job is to actually honor me, because when I honor me, I'm honoring everybody. So the first kind of wild experience that kind of gave me, I think, a taste of what I would be doing was I was doing energy work on an ex-partner naked. And this was a guy that I had like done a lot of everything with. Like he was somebody that just wanted to try everything. And he needed ecstasy to like go on these like sexual journeys. I did not. I realized I was high without ecstasy.
Although MDMA is being used a lot in assisted healing journeys.
Like, yeah, and there's a place for all of it. Like,
yeah.
And I I was giving him energy work. I was working on his hand, and he started to get hard, and he came, and he had a full-blown orgasm without me touching him, without, I was hovering over his hand.
And so what was that? What happened?
Well, right before he had come over, I'd gone into this meditation, and I'd gone so deep into love, so deep into oneness. That was all I was embodying. And so that transmitted into his body. And what was so beautiful is that prior to that experience with him, that had been happening in my own meditations. The deeper I would fall into love, my body would start to orgasm. And it was just like, and I spent a lot of time breathing in and telling my body it was safe to be this much love, because it's uncontrollable.
All right, I'll go back to that piece around like letting yourself tell yourself it is safe to be this much love. Like, what happened for you in that moment? Were you just like, oh my God, like it is safe for me to be this much? Because I think too, there's this thing, and I don't know if a lot of women, I've gone through it personally. I just actually really went through a whole journey of it when I first actually came to our mentor. And it was like feeling like I am too much. Like, maybe that's why men, keep on breaking up with me, or why relationships aren't working. Because I'm too much woman. I'm just like, too loud, too wild, too sensual, too sexual. Like, and so what was that for you? You're just like, okay, I'm just going to let myself just be all of the, and like, what were you thinking when that happened?
Well, I mean,
feeling?
It was an experience, but then I obviously had actual experiences happening in life to then anchor that in. So I still have had men literally run away from me because I'm too much. Like my ex-boyfriend, like I'll never forget watching him literally physically run. Like same with this last guy I was with. Like it's always too much, right? But I practice celebrating the too muchness, like loving that about myself, right? So really just that's like a little bit of inner child work of just like, I love that about you. I love that you are too much. You're so good at being too much, and just doing that kind of self-soothing and self-prayer. But in the moment of those orgasmic meditations, I had been doing a lot of trauma healing. So I don't want to like negate that part, that in order to experience all the bliss that I do, I had to like shed some of the stuff that was holding me back from that. And that was still stored in the cells of my body. So there was grief and things that had to go. But the whole point of any of that stuff is not to even make a story about it. It's really just to feel, breathe, and release it. Mm-hmm. And as I did that, then the orgasmic energy would start to flood my body. And so I would keep breathing. And I was using crystals also to support my body. And I would meditate on this rose quartz. I don't have it there. Stone. I would meditate on top of it, like my bare pussy on top of the rose quartz.
Wow.
And I had a lot of radical self practices I did during the space. And so I would fall into the oneness and breathe and open up and just surrender my mind, surrender my body, surrender my identity, giving it all up, just literally saying these things out loud. Let love, have its way with me. Love, have your way with me. Mm. And then the orgasmic energy would start to come in, and I would notice the body like clench in certain places, and I would breathe and be like, body, it's okay. You're safe to be this. And then the more I would do that, and this was like over a course of multiple meditations, it didn't all happen in one. Yeah. But the one leading up to where I then harnessed it and somebody else could receive it, there's probably about 5 meditations where I just practiced feeling the energy running through my body, opening to more, staying in the wonder, coming on the crystal, literally. Okay. And then with the come on the crystal, I would put the crystal on my heart. And like, I don't know why it fucking worked.
You know that everyone listening to this is like, where do I get me a rose quartz right now? They're going to be practicing this. I'm going to be hearing about this for a long time.
I'm on a crystal
Right?
and put it on your heart.
Okay. Noted. Wow.
So that was the beginning of like, I don't need anyone. I'm here to be all of this bliss and this love, and this is what I am. And then it took some time to figure out how to do that in like the practical world.
You know, your story is reminding me of the power, like, of being and knowing that we can be this much orgasmic energy just on our own, right? So it's really like releasing the attachment, I think, that one can have to, like, feeling like they need a partner in order to stimulate that. And I'm actually, like, when you're telling your story, I'm like, I had a thing like that in a river. I was in a stream at a festival on LSD, and I was meditating, and I was like looking at all the people, and I'm like, oh, I'm feeling so much peace. And all of a sudden, all of the energy started to flow together, and I had this like crazy full chakra orgasmic experience. And I was like, oh, in a river. My friend's like, are you okay? And I'm like, I'm just having a spiritual orgasm. Like, you know, so plant medicines for me helped open that up too. So for anyone listening, but wow. And so you were just meditating. You just started meditating and asking for this energy to come into you.
Yeah. It started to come in when I let go of the grief I had stored in my body.
Okay. Okay. And
that was the opening. So when I don't know how much story you want, but you had a
maybe share. Can you share a little bit about what that journey was like to get through that too as well for people?
Yeah. So when I was 20, my mom committed suicide, and she was like this priestess also, and she very much like told me I was magical my whole life, and used to call me Merlin, the magician. And you know, when I would burn myself or hurt myself as a little kid, she would do what we called light, and she'd hover her hands over my body. And so I was aware of all these things thanks to her. But she had a hard time grounding her talents and superpowers and magical gifts and abilities here, right? Because when you are so out of the box, no one can relate to you, right? There's not a template for being this much, right? And so she, it's like, yeah, there isn't a template for it. You have to trust source and spirit and yourself. Yeah, to be so trusting in love. So, so she went through a journey where she had this breakdown and was like diagnosed with bipolar, then had MS, and just gave up basically. And when she committed suicide, I ran from that grief for like 10 years. And I drank way too much, you know, like did lots of different drugs, not like addicted to any one thing, but I had like an eating disorder, and I was just in a lot of body hate and shame and just numbing out completely. And after 10 years, I came across a spiritual teacher that basically created a container that was safe enough where I finally felt safe to go down to the very bottom of that grief and feel through all of that pain and the abandonment, which was really the abandonment that the ego had made up, that I was abandoned by source, by spirit. And when I felt to that, it was like tears and then anger and then space. And when I got to the space, I like opened my eyes and all of this bliss like flooded in. It was like the truth of who I am got to return, because there was no longer the energies, you know, of the anger and the grief that I was resisting, right? Everything is energy. And so whatever we put our attention on is what we get to experience, but also what we resist is also what we experience.
There's like these words coming through as you're sharing this, and it's like it's almost like the pain and the anger is like the initiation. It's kind of like the initiation gateway in order to get to the place, because you know, it's part of the emotional spectrum and we can't actually avoid it. We have to go through it.
Yeah.
And so it's kind of like, for anyone who saw the Never Ending Story, you remember those big like eagle beings, and that he has to make it through it's like a gateway that tests you, and you have to like just surrender to those feelings in order to get to the other side. Hey.
Yeah. Yeah. It's making all energies welcome. And not identifying with anything or creating meaning of any energy. Energy is just being energy. The humans are like, this is anger, this is grief, this is sad, this makes you feel a certain way. None of that is real.
Ooh. Okay, you are epic. You're epic. I'm so grateful I've met you. And so, okay, so then you moved into the space of like just being able to now like allow that peace, and then from peace, so like then you start to move into bliss and orgasmic energy and pleasure and sensation and sensuality. Can you start to like transition us into, I think, these deeper levels of intimacy that one starts to explore and get into as, they start to delve into the tantric or orgasmic practices of like sex priestessing. And, my own journey, when I started to come into this, I really was like, wow, it's kind of like eating junk food for your entire life. And then you finally have like a really fancy gourmet meal, and you're like, oh, it's like a richness and a slowness and a silkiness and it's like the fullest flavor of food. And that's for me what like coming into this work really did. And I was like, oh, sexuality and pleasure can be like this, like evocative, because you don't see that I've never seen any porn that can match the depths one goes to in this. And so bring us into this place where you started to get into this, and you're like unleashing your pleasure and like your fucking sex goddess. Like, what was that like for you? Like, was there like an experience for you that you're like, wow, like that was when I knew that like, whew, I unleashed myself.
I mean, there's two that are coming to mind. I just want to speak to what you were speaking about with like this whole awareness about that slowness, that sensuality, and like the priestess energy is the like paying attention and the breath and like the lusciousness and like the indulgence of energy. So you can't like, you don't want to eat it at the drive-through, right? Like you want to be honored and it doesn't mean you can't occasionally like have a quickie. It's not about like all or nothing.
Yeah.
But when you start to bring this like level of intention and awareness and like self-honoring, it's very hard to go back. And so then you find yourself giving to yourself on an even greater level, and then you receive on an even greater level from your lovers or from whoever you're choosing to play with. So when the pandemic started, I met a guy online through an online tantra festival. This is like, that was my experience.
Hint, that's where you go to meet really amazing people. Tantra festivals online.
It was like the third day, and I didn't even go to the first 2 days. I just went to that third day. It was my first class, and we got put into breakout rooms immediately, and his was the first face I saw, and we were both like, hey. So he ended up writing my name down, found me on Facebook, and was flying through LA to go back to the UK. And I was like, you should just come stay with me, because that's what you do. You invite a strange man. But when you are in tune, you can read people. You can scan people's fields. You can feel into the frequency of what is safe, because you're safe. Yeah. And it's not an intellectual experience. It's an embodied thing. But before he came over, I made sure I went into a meditation, and I said, okay, Aurelie, what are the things that you are wanting him to give to you? What are you expecting from him? What are you wanting this experience to be? And let's give that all to yourself right now. so that by the time he showed up, I was full. And then whatever we co-created was just icing on top of an already iced cake. It was just like there was no neediness. There is just play and bliss. And then I could be completely myself because it didn't matter. Like I didn't need him to like me or need it to go a certain way. Like I had already preset the whole experience energetically. And then before we got naked, I asked what his intention was for our time together. And then I shared mine. And after he left, he told me that moment like changed the whole experience for him. And we got to, like, because we had just put it already on the table. So then we got to be so vulnerable when we were naked and like have these like mind-blowing sexual experiences. Like, oh my God. Like, have you had an orgasm when you've already like on top of an orgasm that like you're already coming and then you come on top of the coming? Like I didn't even.
Yeah, girl. Yeah, girl. It's like version 2.0. I also want to just presence, for everyone listening to as well, like the importance of what she shared was that you really set the container even before you two met. And that's, I think, one of the aspects of being a sex priestess is that you initiate and start to cultivate that container with intention. And then when you also, kind of, when you're initiating the experience, it's not from a place of like, okay, well, this is what we're doing. It's like, I'd love to invite this in. It's like, yeah, it's just initiating and inviting, right? Versus like teaching. You're not here to teach somebody. You're initiating them and through an invitation.
Yeah. Yeah. Beautiful. Thank you for saying that because it's different than control. Yeah. And as like a priestess, I love being feminine. I love that surrender. I love like being soft and flowy. And I'm not, moments come out where you want to dominate and stuff and you're willing to play all roles, right? Like, but I definitely love being more in the surrendered, submissive energy. But the pre-setting it is like really what we get to do as empowered beings because most people are not functioning where we are. And so we are the higher vibrating glass of water, right? If you put two glasses of water next to each other, the lower vibrating glass of water is going to raise to the higher. So it's up to us to set that stage energetically. And then the people that play with us get to meet us there or not,
Your energy too, as well as reminding me of, what you've been sharing, that, there's an initiation that happens for us as well, that we continue to initiate ourselves into more and more surrender to our true natures and our authentic desire, and that our pleasure is holy, that it is holy, and that there's nothing wrong with sexuality, and like really coming onto the other end of the spectrum. And I've been in this work for like 10 years and there's still experiences that I'm having now, and I'm like, oh my God, like it continues to deepen and evolve and unleash. I was sharing with you before we hopped on about my experience in Greece recently, where like it felt, and actually I didn't share, but like it felt like this experience where I was in Greece, and it like the moon was full. It was a full moon, and I felt like I was being initiated into the Grecian temple rites of passage. And not to like overshare, but like I want to initiate something in the conversation here. But I had my first experience. I'd never actually had a threesome before. And so one of my like little things, I was like, God, can I please have a threesome when I'm in Greece, right? And on my very last night in Greece, I actually met these 7 Italian men who just happened to show up in my Airbnb. And I like basically asked them if they wanted to have a group ritual sex experience. And they were like, yeah. And I was like, okay, get in there and like take off your clothes. And I kind of guided it in this experience, and it was so beautiful. And that was the first time I'd ever given myself permission to do exactly what I wanted. I wanted all of them. And I was like, I gave myself the permission. And then I gave myself permission later to have the security guard. And then, it was like this, like, I'd never done that, given myself fully into hedonism before. And, I think too, it's interesting because, like, I think in like a lot of the pseudo spiritual community, in New Age community, like, oh, sex is sacred, and you don't want to like have sex. You're going to exchange your sexual trauma or your ancestral trauma with someone, and all of this stuff. From people that like fucking don't know anything about sacred sexuality, and they're like, yeah, you're gonna like no, and it's like, wait a minute. And so I just wanted to like address that here around, like, actually the healing power of sexuality, and like what it's been like for you to really step into your fullness as a woman through giving yourself the permission slip to have sex with exactly who you want, sometimes in relationships, sometimes not. Like, what has that been like for you?
I mostly don't have sex in relationships. I'm so glad you're bringing this up, because it is like, I sometimes forget that there are so many rules and definitions and meaning tied to spirituality and sexuality that are just, even in Tantra, like there's so many boxes that I'm like, no, this is all like no boxes.
Yeah. No boxes, honey. And that's the beautiful
no judgment,
thing.
No rules. Like, that's not how we flow here. So yeah, I am down with your Italian Stallion 7-man. That sounds like, I'm like, I need to start adding some requests myself. Yeah, like I it's, I think because it's so normal for me, like 3 guys went down on me in one day, separate times, but all on the same day. Is that weird? I don't know. Like, that's normal to me. That would be normal. Or I love when sometimes I'm like, oh, I haven't had sex in a while. But then it's like, no, you just did, like, last week. Like, what a while. Right? So funny.
So what I'm hearing is like, and it may be that this is like one of the definitions of being a sex priestess, is listening to yourself and your authentic desire, and then giving that desire permission to be lived reality. And how does one go about that? Because I know, like, it's been quite a journey even for me, and I'm like, I thought I was really like unleashed and out there, and I'm like, I just had my first 7 but group experience this year, and I'm like, and people call me the queen of pleasure, and I'm like still finding myself. So like, how, for those that are listening, what are some ways that people can start to like tangibly discover that for themselves in their lives, whether they're man, woman, bi, queer, trans, asexual, demisexual, like what is?
So I would say, because I've done it both ways, right? Like, I did like the slutty version of where I wasn't empowered in my sexuality, sensuality, where I didn't honor me. And then I've done the slutty empowered priestess stuff. And I say slutty because it's not a bad word, and I don't think there's anything wrong with any word or energy, right? It's the intention behind it. So it's first, where are you coming from, right? Because that embodiment, that being state, it is what's going to call in the partners that are going to honor you. Like, you left that 7-man experience like feeling empowered and honored because you were already honoring you. You were already holding that space and frequency. So that would be like step 1, just like embody the truth of who you are, and from that state wander into, I wonder what would be fun for me. And let yourself wonder, because if you've never let yourself wonder into like what might be fun, it might be off the bat and interesting. And I wanted to try, like, I wonder what it'd be like to have a cucumber in my pussy. I don't know why I wondered into that. And then I experienced it, and I was like, oh, cool. And then that was that. I didn't need to have another cucumber in my pussy again, but it was like, it's like, allow yourself to wonder. And then from that space, put your request in the universe, right? Like, I definitely believe in like the power of orgasmic manifestation, so if you want to go into a self-pleasure ritual and ask for that desire, that would be a really powerful way to start to call it in. Because the thing is we, as these like powerful priestesses, we call things in. Like we don't have to do a lot of doing. We do have to do some. We're not in a like complete inaction universe yet, but but the being is the first part always. Embodiment of that bliss and that pleasure and that love, so that you can call in those people, those play partners that really want to honor you, that want to play there with you.
Channeling a question for the collective, for those people who are in monogamous relationships and they're like, I am so curious and I still feel either stifled in my relationship, or like what advice or suggestions would you give to people that are in that situation, a monogamous relationship, but are one of the partners obviously is like, how do we start to explore our desires more from a place of love, but also from a place of openness?
Yeah, that's such a beautiful question, because I would say 50%, if not more, of my clients are all married or in a partnership. And some of them come to see me in secret. And so I get a lot of people that are scared. They're scared to lose what they have by being themselves. Yeah, I think that's probably one of the biggest fears. So what if there was no such thing as losing anything? And that everything that is meant for you will show up and is here and will be for you and is always serving you in the highest. Because if we approach anything from that state of fear, right, or worry or concern, or the I'm stifled, all of that doesn't, one, produce any sort of solution. And your solution is going to be completely unique for you. So what could you do that supports you tuning in and tapping into the truth of who you are, so that you can start to access that wisdom of your higher self? And since everything is energy, everything can be transmuted with energy. Do not underestimate the power of blowing light into spaces, into relationships, into bodies, into places, into meetings. Like, you guys listening, I know you all know this, so that's why I'm speaking to it. Not everyone I could have this conversation with.
As you were sharing that, I was getting this graphic in my head of like just people even sitting down with their partners and doing that meditation together from a place of curiosity. And like, again, there's something beautiful when we ask spirit or source or our higher selves for insights, and like to do that with your partner together, like, hey, I've been really feeling like there's deeper places that we could go in our relationship and in our sexuality and in relating. And perhaps we can open up and ask in a meditation what that would be. Like, so maybe you want to rewind what Orly was sharing there and just use that as like a little guided meditation.
Yeah, that's so beautiful. Yeah, because that's that surrender piece, which then translates right into like better sex.
Yeah.
Deeply surrender.
Wow.
And ask for guidance and be willing to be in that unknown, which is uncomfortable. But I promise if you ask, you will receive an answer. And if you want better orgasms, I promise if you go into wonder right before and as you're coming, guess what? It keeps fucking going. I wonder how much more pleasure I can feel. I wonder how much more bliss. And I wonder how this could all be easy.
I'm sure there's a ton of people that would love to work with you and they don't live in your city. Do you work with people online or remotely?
I do. Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So beautiful. And where can people find you,
They
Orly?
can find me at orgasmicawakenings.com.
Oh, that website name just in itself, if you type it into your browser, you might have an orgasm.
I just started to have one as I said it.
Beautiful. This has been such a rich and enlivening and like honest conversation around like sexuality, female sexuality. I could definitely like go in way deeper. I think I want to have a part 2 with you. But thank you again so much for just bringing your heart, your soul, your pussy wisdom to our interview today. And I'm so deeply inspired by you. Thank you again for coming on the show. This is Orly Devon on Temple Talks, Transmissions from the New Earth. And this is going to be a new earth that we are birthing through our orgasmic awakening. So thank you so much for being who you are on the planet and just sharing this wisdom with all of us. So
Yeah. Oh, thank you so much. It's so true. Our orgasmic energy like heals the planet.
amen to that. And women, thank you.
Yes. Thank you.